face.
Yeah.
So when you
It says
click on it, you should be, yeah,
it says
present.
present.
Yes.
It says present now.
Yes, that is it. That's the button you need to share your screen.
Do I press that?
Yes, please go ahead.
Allow Google Meet to share your screen. Allow to share the screen.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
I pressed that. What happened?
And do you see a modal? So you just need to click on the part you want to share. You'll see a modal or a pop-up. Yes, beautiful. Yes, yes, beautiful. And now you just need to present so that it takes the whole part of your screen.
Can you see it?
Perfect. Yes, it's
Great.
clear.
Great.
Yes. Okay, so we're going to start officially now, and I'm going to, make some introductions and welcome everyone who has joined us from wherever, across the globe today. So,
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for joining. And today we're having Dr. Richard Larson, who would be talking to us on model thinking for everyday life and how to make better decisions. So Dr. Larson is a professor at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT. So he's also the founding director of the MIT LINCE and the principal investigator of MIT Blossoms. He's an author, a co-author, and editor of 7 books and over 100 scientific articles. We are so honored to have you here with us, Dr. Richard. And I can't wait to actually listen and learn. And I'm sure a lot of us here can't. So thank you everyone for joining. And I'm now going to hand it over to Dr. Larson, to teach us. And from wherever you are, please make sure you're jotting down, make sure you're taking notes because it's going to be packed. And there'll be a section to ask questions. And if you have any questions during the session, you could just type it in the chat. And when it's time for questions, it will be read out and Dr. Larson would be able to answer your questions. Yes, thank you, Dr. Larson. You can go ahead, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I noticed my camera is on, so can you see me?
Yes, I can see you very clearly.
Okay, great. Hi. It's an honor and a privilege to do this, and I appreciate this honor very much. Thank you so much. Is it 6 o'clock in Nigeria right now?
It is. It's 6 o'clock.
6 o'clock.
7. I think we're an hour ahead. Here it's 7 o'clock.
Oh, it's 7 o'clock. Okay, it's 1 o'clock here. Okay, so let me get going now. So model thinking for everyday life. And thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. I've been looking forward to this all week. Thank you so much. So that's the book, Model Thinking for Everyday Life. And it's published by INFORMS, the Institute for Operations Research and Management Science. And hello, Nigeria! Can you hear me? Okay, I guess you can hear me.
Yes, I can.
Okay. And I'm talking from Lexington, Massachusetts, United States, home of the American Revolution. Less than a mile away from me, a little bit more than a kilometer, is this Minuteman statue. And Lexington was the birthplace of the revolution against the British occupation and ownership of the Americas at the time. And so this is about a kilometer away from my house. That's a very famous statue at Lexington Green. On Lexington Green were the first 5 fatalities of our war against the British. This is what my backyard and my house looks like right now. So I doubt if you have snow where you are. we
No,
have
we don't.
we have snow and ice. I just thought I'd let you know that. That's what it looks like outside right now. But it's beautiful. The sun is out. There's not a cloud in the sky. It's gorgeous. And it's about -3 Celsius temperature wise. So about the book, just Steven Pinker, professor at Harvard, says the book is filled with surprising insights about the hazards, ordeals, and pleasures of everyday life, revelations that seem perfectly intuitive after Larson has explained them. Mark Daskin, University of Michigan. I really like the book. I think it should be required reading for any undergraduate operations research or industrial engineering program. Michael Horn, I'll let you read this, says this, but he says some very nice things about the book. And Sanjay Sarma, who's a very famous guy. And Larson's book is a really fresh and innovative journey that subtly awakens the faculty of both playfully and effectively. So I know there was a bit of a concern about this presentation. Should it be research or practice? And to me, you can't have one without the other. My field is operations research. I've been in that field ever since I was a doctoral student at MIT. And operations research means research on operations. So practice and theory creation are all integrated as one, as far as I'm concerned. So my entire career has incorporated both. So I don't make any distinction between research and practice, because to me they're the same thing. So a few things. First of all, in many logistical systems, some of these things are a little bit counterintuitive. You can speed service by deliberately inserting delays. Or if you're choosing the locations of wind turbines to get you the maximum electrical energy, the location with the highest average wind speed is not necessarily the one that provides you with the most electrical energy. If we have time later, if you're interested to know why, I'll let you know. Now, baseball is a national pastime in the U.S. So let's say we have two baseball players, Tom and Dick. Tom has the higher batting average in each of two successive seasons. A batting average is the fraction of time which you're up at the plate to hit, and you make a hit. So Tom has the higher batting average in each of two successive seasons. But when the two seasons are combined to one macro season, Dick has the higher batting average. That sounds impossible, but it's not. And simply moving chronically ill patients from one ward in a hospital to a next ward in the hospital can increase the life expectancies of both groups. That sounds very counterintuitive. Without any medical interventions, if you select some people from Ward A and select them appropriately and put them in the Ward B, you could actually increase the life expectancy of both groups without any medical intervention. And again, if we have time, I'll explain how that can work. Queuing delay. If you do a Google search on my name, Richard Larson, you'll see that my nickname is Dr. Q, Q-U-E-U-E. It's a wonderful word. Queuing is a English language word that has 5 vowels in a row. I'm not aware of any other English language words that have 5 vowels in a row. But my nickname is Dr. Q. And in most service systems that people have to wait in queue, the length of the wait, the duration of the wait, is not usually the most important part of customer satisfaction. So all these kinds of counterintuitive things. So in my book, Model Thinking for Everyday Life, we burst the bubble of a lot of common thinking and do a major mind shift about everyday thinking. So, and I say that the answer to many of our problems lies not in the answer itself, but in the thinking process that gets us there. So in writing the book, which took me 2 years during the COVID 2-year lockdown here, is when I wrote the book. I tried to develop one's critical thinking skills using a framework of conceptual and mathematical concepts to help us guide where we want to go. And so we want to think critically. So there was a story in southern Italy that these monks, these visitors to a monastery park in the afternoon at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 3 or 4 visitors who were friends would visit this monastery garden area, and they would see this globe here shining in the sunlight in the garden at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and they noticed that the bottom of the globe was hot and the top of the globe was cool, and they couldn't understand that because the sun was hitting at the top. And they went there 3 days in a row at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And lo and behold, it was hot on the bottom and cold on the top. So one of the 3 visitors thought he was the theoretical physicist. So he spent 2 or 3 or 4 days working out a theory about why that's true. And he was so excited that he took himself and his 2 visitors at 1 o'clock, 2 hours earlier than usual. And guess what they found? They found the monk rotating the desk 180 degrees to put the hot part of the bottom and the cool part of the top. So there's no physics involved. Actually, a human person did it, and they didn't see that until they showed up at 1 o'clock. Famous jazz blues magician B.B. King. Any day I don't learn something new is a wasted day. I think Albert Einstein also said the same thing. Any day I don't learn something new is a wasted day. This is not a wasted day for me because you folks are teaching me something, and I hope to learn more about Nigeria if we have a question and answer session. Okay, so there's some sharpened pencils. There's some blank sheets of paper. And I'm an old-fashioned guy. I like to, when I'm really thinking about a problem, I like to turn off the computer. I like to get out blank sheets of paper and some sharpened pencils and work through the things using basic principles. No heavy math. We like to do things in a simple, entertaining way. And we like to see the world around us in terms of models. In fact, each day when I wake up, I create a model of the day. I send an email to myself saying, what I think I'm going to do, the first hour of the day, second hour of the day, blah, 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 blah. And I have a golden retriever dog, Maisie. The first thing I put in there is her 3 Maisie walks. I take her on leash-free walks in woods and forests each day. It gives me the exercise also. So I make a model of the day. And of course, things change over the day, so I might have to adjust the model, and that happens in real life. Anytime you make a model of something, you're going to get more information, or the weather changes or something, you might have to adjust it. So here's a little story. So there's it's raining, and that's the windshield of a car. And the daughter says, "Mom, how come it always rains faster when you drive faster?" And why does she say that? Well, as the mom drives faster in the rainstorm, the mom has to make the windshield wipers go faster so she can still see through the windshield. And when she slows down or stops, she doesn't have to have the windshield wipers going so fast. Okay, so we think about that. We scribble down some things with pencil and paper. We wonder what's going on there. Sharpen pencil, thinking, calculating, pencil and paper. And then, so in my book, we have this conversation, and the mom has a conversation with her daughter as together they think through the question of raindrops on the windshield, and also it's a function of speed of the car. Now, even though mom might know the answer, I mean, maybe she doesn't know the answer. But even if she doesn't know the answer, she orchestrates the discovery, learning discussion with her daughter as if she does not. And so they go through a process which I call discovery learning. This is a key learning, teaching and learning method. And we can thank the American Benjamin Franklin, at least in the U.S., of making it widely known in the United States. And in the appendix to my book, I have a full mathematical treatment of raindrops coming down on the windshield, including the terminal velocity of raindrops and all that kind of stuff. But you don't need all that full math to have a nice learning discussion about raindrops hitting the windshield. So Benjamin Franklin said, "Tell me and I forget." And so I hope your conversation with me today is just more than me telling you things. Teach me and I remember. So maybe I'm teaching you a little bit today. Involve me and I learn. So somehow I want to involve you. I want you to think about these things. And after my talk, I want you to take a pencil and paper and work through some of these puzzles as well. Again, the computer is not necessary. In fact, I think a computer can be a hindrance to one's learning and thinking. So when I'm really seriously thinking and learning, I have my computer shut off. So here's a Model T Ford, about 1918, 1919. And you can see why they called the front window of a car a windshield. It's a shield against the wind. That's the original windshield. And you notice it's totally vertical. So if the rain is falling down vertically and there's no wind, as long as the car is not moving, there's no rain hitting the windshield. The rain only hits the windshield when the car is moving. And there's a case where, the number of drops hitting the windshield is proportional, everything else being equal, proportional to the speed of the car. Classic Model T Ford. So then we have a very popular radio show. I don't know if it's still on anymore in the United States. Garrison Keillor. And at the end of the show, he says, "And that's the news from Lake Wobegon, where all the women are strong, all the men are good looking, and all the children are above average." And that was his famous closing line every week he gave the show. And so you might ask, is it possible for all the children of Lake Wobegon, a fictional town in the Middle West of the United States, to be above average? And the answer is yes. And I'll let you think about that. Flaws of averages. How about the bus average inter-arrival time? So you're in a city, and the city transportation system includes public buses that you have to pay a fare for to get on usually. And so you might have a measure of the inter-arrival time between buses. So maybe the average inter-arrival time is 10 minutes between buses. Okay, so you might think, if the inter-arrival time is 10 minutes, but they're not scheduled, they're just inter-arrivals. Maybe if I arrive at a random time, on average, I'll have to wait half that amount. I'll have to wait 5 minutes. So that's the first kind of thinking you might have. But unfortunately, in cities, the physics of buses is that they tend to clump together. Like this picture here shows 3 buses clumped together. Okay, so what are the physics of bus systems that lead to clumping? And how does a random passenger arriving at curbside experience the delay in the bus? And so the delay is not dependent only on the average inter-arrival time. Because with this picture here, you may have the average bus inter-arrival time is 10 minutes, but maybe they wait 30 minutes and then 3 buses show up at all the same time. That's not very helpful in terms of your curbside waiting. So one way to think about this is that the curbside arriving passenger can be thought of as parachuting onto the time axis. So when you show up at your bus stop, you basically, from a conceptual point of view, parachuting onto the time axis. And suppose in our fictional bus system, we had buses that were 20 minutes apart, followed by buses that were 2 minutes apart. and then 20 minutes apart, then 2 minutes apart. So if you parachute onto the time axis that way, you're much more likely to end up in a 20-minute segment waiting for a bus than a 2-minute segment. And that's the way this goes. So you can actually go through the bus arrival time. The mean time between bus arrivals is 11 minutes. And so you might think that the average wait would be half of that, 5.5 minutes. But no, the average wait is much closer to 11 minutes, because when you parachute onto the time axis at a random time, you're much more likely to end up at a 20-minute gap than a 2-minute gap. And I go through the calculations, and the calculation here is our passenger's average wait is not 5.5 minutes, but 9.18 minutes. So variability in the operation of a system can cause great degradations in the service levels. And that's a prime example of it. So we have other examples. Everyone hears of laws of averages. So I love flaws of averages. Flaws of averages. Shocker. Half of all marriages, and these are USA statistics. Half of all marriages end in divorce. Okay, that's a shocker. But only one in 8 current marriages will end in divorce. Only 1 in 8 current marriages will end in divorce. So that sounds like a contradiction, doesn't it? Half of marriages end in divorce, but only 1 in 8 current marriages end in divorce. And I'll let you think about this, because one is a flow and one is a level kind of situation. Both statements are correct. Both statements are correct. And again, model thinking requires us to think critically about data, about statistics, and about the world in which we live. Queuing. Again, you do a Google search, and my nickname is Dr. Q. And so we have the Danish telephone engineer, A.K. Erlang. He was the inventor of queuing theory. This goes back to 1919 or so, more than 100 years ago. And what caused him to invent queuing theory? Well, at the time, when they invented the telephone back in the late 1800s, if you wanted to talk to somebody, you had to string a wire from your house to your neighbor's house to talk to them on the telephone. And then around 1919 or so, they came up with the centralized telephone switch, which were usually staffed by female telephone operators who would take wires and connect your wire to somebody else's post and connect you manually that way. So Erlang invented queuing theory to know how big that central station should be, how many female operators there should be to do those connections, and what the capacity of that system should be. So he invented queuing theory over 100 years ago. And again, this is the thing that I'm most famous for, because my nickname is Dr. Q, and so I rely a lot. Erlang's equations have stayed over time and are still the most widely used equations in the application of queuing theory to the real world. Here we have Lily Tomlin, a comedian, as an eccentric telephone operator. She was a TV star. And in the U.S., we have a 3-digit emergency number, 911, which is throughout the entire country. So if you have a police, fire, or ambulance emergency, or any other related emergency, you dial 911, and they'll match you with the police, fire, and or ambulance service that's needed, and dispatch those services to your location, whether it's to your home or you're in a car crash or something with injuries. So it used to be in New York City, before they had 911, before they had this, it was a very simple number, that in New York City, in Manhattan, they had 2 different numbers for police in Manhattan, 2 different numbers for police in Brooklyn, and 1 each in the other 3 boroughs. And that was just for police. And in Manhattan, you had to know whether in Manhattan North or Manhattan South to know which number to use. And they had similar different numbers for fire and for ambulance. You take all these together, it's about over 20 phone numbers they used to have in New York City to call for emergency help. Now it's just 911. So that was a great move forward. So in queuing theory, there's a relationship to the amount of traffic, the amount of people who come in and need the service, and the delays involved. So at the bottom of this chart, we have the Greek letter rho, which is the fraction of time that a server is busy in a queuing system. And rho can be 0 when there's no work to be done at all on average, or it can go 0.5, means they're busy half the time and idle half the time. 0.9 means they're busy handling customers, doing service 90% of the time. They only have 10% of the time to have a cup of coffee or a drink of water or whatever. So what Erlang's equations show here, and this is from Erlang's equations, is what the average queuing delay will be as a function of how busy the system is. So if the system is busy 50% of the time, the blue line at the top shows just a single server system. So if that single server is busy half the time, then the 1 on the vertical axis shows that the average waiting time is 1 service time unit. So if a service time is 60 seconds, then on average, you have to wait 60 seconds before the server can answer you. If you have 10 servers, there's basically no waiting time at all until you get to 70% busy, and certainly 80% busy. And all of them, in terms of the busyness fraction, as you get up to 0.9 and closer to 1, I call 1 the wall of death. At the wall of death, at 1, everyone is busy 100% of the time. There's no gap, and the queuing delay can grow without bound. And unfortunately, that has happened on occasion in various kinds of queuing systems where the demand for service exceeds the capacity. That's a very unfortunate event, but it has occurred in practice and will occur in practice in the future. For instance, because of weather situations, or a meteorite hitting hitting a community or something like this, some major huge emergency where telephone calls come from everybody. So as a doctoral student at MIT many years ago, I did some work with New York City's 911 system. Their 911 system is the one that replaced the 21 different emergency numbers they had for emergencies in New York City. And New York City was the first major U.S. city to implement a 911 system. It made it so much simpler. So you didn't have to have these numbers memorized and know what geography you're in to know who to call. You just called 911. But shortly after this was implemented, I saw letters to the editor of the New York Times. Dear New York Times, I called the mayor's 911 system last Saturday night. I let it ring for 18 minutes. I got no answer. So I hung up and thought maybe I had the wrong answer. So I called again. I let it ring for 20 minutes. And then after 20 minutes, they said, police emergency, may I help you? And I saw several letters to the editor like that. So I volunteered my time, and I actually went and actually kind of lived in the system for a month, working side by side with 2 lieutenants of the New York City Police Department, who were in charge with training the 911 operators, who were all police officers. And I was there as the model-based statistician and the person who's going to apply queuing models to this. And so what you have here on this figure is the hour by hour, and I think this is for Saturdays. Is this for Saturdays? I think it's for Saturdays, yeah. The hour by hour volume of calls. So you can see 1,200 calls per hour from midnight to 1 a.m. as that Saturday starts. and then it kind of drops down. It wiggles here and there. And from 5 a.m. to 6 a.m., the number of calls is very, very small, very, very low. And then over the course of the day, it builds up again. And then the last 4 hours of the day from 8 p.m. to midnight, again, there's 1,400 calls per hour. So you see the huge variability in the call rate of calls for service. Now, the police department knew that there was variability, but they hadn't plotted this out like this to see visually how hugely changing it was. So to respond to their knowledge that, well, they say from 3 o'clock to 7 o'clock, things are pretty low. So what they did, the blue line that crosses, it starts around 22 or so, and then it drops down to 11, then it goes up to 22 again. It stays more or less flat most of the day, except from 3 a.m. to 7 a.m. That's the number of telephone operators the New York City Police Department had over manning 911, scheduled over the course of the day. They said, well, Professor Larson, well, of course, I wasn't a professor at the time, I was a doctoral student. He said, Mr. Larson, we recognize that there's a lull in the early morning, so that's when we double up on rest breaks, and the operators take a sleeping nap. Each one takes a 45-minute nap, and that's where we double up. And I said, well, have you ever charted this out to see whether your 3 a.m. to 7 a.m. 50% reduction is adequate for the amount of variability you get? And they said, no. So I made these charts, and I showed them what was going on. Now, the color, the dotted line color on the red shows the number of calls in which you delayed 15 seconds or more. The one below that, the dot, shows the number of calls that were delayed 30 seconds or more. And some of those calls were delayed many, many, many minutes. So when I showed them those charts, and I developed charts like that for each of the 7 days of the week, they were stunned. So they invited me to give a presentation to the police commissioner of New York and his top advisors. Now you can imagine, and this police commissioner had a reputation for being very tough and very rigorous, very difficult to get along. But he was a very respected professional. So you can imagine me. I'm like 23, 24 years old, and I'm at this meeting with armed and uniformed officers and the police commissioner, who's well known throughout the 8 million people in New York City. And so the lieutenants I'd been working with for a month introduced me, and they said, here's Mr. Larson from MIT, and he's going to show you what's going on with our 911 system. So I started making this presentation, and then the police commissioner said, hold on, wait a minute. Let's just stop all this. He said to the lieutenants, are these Easter Bunny charts accurate? He called them Easter Bunny charts because they had different colors, some pastel colors. So that was his way of degrading and demeaning my charts and demeaning me. And the two lieutenants took a deep swallow and said, sir, everything he's saying is correct, is accurate. And the commissioner then all of a sudden got very rigid in his chair, and he sat up straight, and he said, please continue. So I continued through my whole presentation, and he said, at the end of that, he said, thank you, sir, thank you very much. I now understand how serious this is. Everything I recommended was implemented within 7 days. It's the fastest recommendation of operations research I ever had up to that time. And to this day, I haven't had any more successful, quick, major implementation as fast. Because once that police commissioner who could, direct things to happen, in 10 seconds, he saw this, he decided he knew he had to change things, and it was changed. So I was very, very happy with that. So here I am, a 23-year-old or whatever it was, graduate student at MIT, and I had that experience. It was an eye-opening experience, as you can tell. It meant a lot to me, and I've never forgotten it decades ago. Over time, I became fascinated with emergency services, police, fire, and ambulance, particularly police and fire. And so I developed something called the hypercube queuing model. And we don't have time today, and probably you don't have the interest to look at this, but basically, this is a queuing model that takes the geography of a city and the relative call rate from different zones in the city, the proposed home locations of ambulances and police cars, and shows then what will happen if you use those home locations on a Friday night or Saturday morning or whenever. And I produced charts that like this, visual map charts that explained exactly what was going on, and with arrows that proposed where to move your facilities, where to move those ambulances, where to move those police cars to reduce the response time to emergencies. And the hypercube queuing model is something I worked on for 2 years straight. So I created the math, and that's the last whole full thing in my life. I actually programmed it myself, line by line, because I wanted everything to be perfect. I didn't want to have any errors, and it was complicated. So I had to be very careful. It took me 2 years to do this. But the hypercube queuing model, you could do a Google search on it. It's still used widely. So we've been talking about critical thinking. I've been trying to indicate to you how I've applied some of my critical thinking to various kinds of problems. And so I call it model-informed critical thinking. And so it's not the mathematics per se, it's the way of thinking. And model thinking has the word model as an adjective has two meanings, supportive meanings. One is exemplary meaning to be emulated, and also model being a conceptual model is sometimes a mathematical model. And a critical thinker is swayed by facts, not emotions or politics or group dynamics. And a critical thinker is aware of the pitfalls of human intuition. As we've seen, a lot of our intuition is wrong and has to be corrected by data and observation. So, life examples of model thinking is one of my favorite is deferred maintenance. And those of you who are more or less close to my age rather than young might remember this guy. This is a Fram oil filter commercial from 1972. And here's the guy who got under the car, under the, so you can see the oil filter. And his famous line is, "You can pay me now or pay me later. Pay me now for an oil filter, which at that time was maybe $8, or pay me later for a new engine, which would be hundreds of dollars. Now it's thousands of dollars." So that's deferred. So if you defer maintenance, you could put off an immediate small expense, but you might incur a huge expense later on because of your deferred maintenance. So in the book, I have in the last chapter of the book, I have a whole section on deferred maintenance. So examples of deferred maintenance: many of us, in our cars, we defer maintenance. In our house, if you have a chimney, if you have a house and you have a chimney, when was the last time you had it inspected? Fire alarms. Even doing this with you now reminds me that I haven't tested my own fire extinguisher recently. So after this talk today, I'm going to go and test my fire extinguisher. Deferred maintenance on yourself. By that I mean exercise and keeping in good shape and good diet. Deferred maintenance your friendships, and and I call about the last thing, my retirement from MIT. And the story there is that when I started at MIT, first of all, I was shocked that they'd ever have me on the faculty. I had the Groucho Marx syndrome. I wouldn't respect a club that would have me as a member. But somehow I got assistant professor, and then I got promoted, and I got tenure. And but when I started, the mandatory retirement age in MIT for a professor was 65, and then they changed it to 75. And so then I figure, okay, at 75, I retire. And then basically the Supreme Court said it's age discrimination to have any age limit. So theoretically now somebody could be a 105-year-old professor and still not retired. So I decided not to do that. I actually wrote a paper and published it in Science magazine, co-authored with a student, and because I worried about if they change the retirement age from 65 to 75, that's going to reduce the flow of incoming assistant professors who are 29 and 30 years old. And so I actually wrote a paper I published in Science magazine to show dramatically that just that change alone from 65 to 75 reduced the number of assistant professor slots by over 20%. And that's very harmful for developing PhDs who want to go into academia. So there was my there I was at MIT, sitting there and wondering, you know, at age 71, why I'm there, because I'm 60 years beyond when I thought I'd have to retire. And then I wrote an article on this, published in Science magazine. There it is, and explained why I decided then finally to retire at that time, even though there was no law that said I had to retire. Anyway, that's it. Thank you very much. Thank you for paying attention. If we have time, if we have the capability, I'm happy to take questions.
Hello, Sir Richard. Thank
Hi.
you so much for the question. Yeah, it was a great one. Yeah, and we really gained a lot. So we'll be asking some questions from the Nigerian perspective, like on our culture, how things happen, and audience could start sending up their question now. Audience could start sending up their question now. Okay, so looking at the looking at what you taught us, different theories from great researchers and then great, most especially the one you dropped about, I've forgotten his name, whereby it talks about if you involve me, then I will learn. You know, I think I posted this on my status around some weeks ago, and someone saw it and was like, that's not totally true, but and that's because of the Nigerian culture uh, and our system. Let me just maybe just our system. So my own personal question before audience start dropping in question is when trying to carry out a research and to the purpose of and the purpose of your research is to have data and the outcome is the outcome of your research is not in line with what people do, like is maybe totally different from what people do, the norms. How do you present it? How do you make people imbibe it daily? Maybe I found out that it is wrong to put salt in your rice, and I know, and I have data. So how do I tell Nigerians that don't put salt in your rice anymore? And they've been eating rice with salt for like many years. So hope you get me, Professor Richard.
Thank you. Thank you. Was that a question or a compliment or both?
Yeah, that was a question. So, like, how does a researcher, how will a researcher like present his data to his audience, whereby the result of his research is totally different from the norms in the culture that he's researching about?
Well, I
Do you
gave you
get me?
some charts today. I gave you some charts today to show you the kinds of data that I presented to police commissioners and to others when I was making strong recommendations for change. One thing I didn't say today is for 40 years, I ran an off-campus consulting company. It typically had 30 full-time employees, and we did major operations research, data-informed consulting around the country, but particularly in the public sector in New York City and Washington, D.C. and St. Louis, Missouri. And that was very rewarding to me because operations research is research on operations. And we did a lot of compensated research on operations with my off-campus consulting company. So I would go to MIT Monday through Thursday, and on Fridays I'd be there. Oftentimes I'd fly to New York just for
Doctor, I don't know if you still hear the weekend content. It's possible we're experiencing technical issues. Okay, so all right, I think he's back. Dr. Richard, we can no longer hear you. You need to unmute your mic.
Now, can you
Yes.
hear me?
Yes. Yes,
I'm sorry.
Doctor.
I'm sorry about that interruption. Anyway, did you manage to hear most of my presentation and see it?
Can you come? I didn't quite.
Thank you. It's an honor for me to speak to all these leaders in Nigeria. I hope someday to actually visit the country.
That's wonderful. That would really love to have you here. And Nigeria is culturally diverse. One should have a great time. Okay, I think I have a question. Someone on the open chat. So David from Madagascar, they say, how do you suggest balancing the use of model or decision with the unpredictability of real life situations?
How do I create a model? How do I, what are the steps in creating a model?
So how do you suggest balancing the use of models or decision making with the unpredictability of real life situations? That's what they is asking.
I'm having a hard time understanding you because our connection, our audio connection is not that good.
Yeah, so Evergreen, from your hand, I think the sound it's not that great. Professor Richard, David asked a question on the chat. He said, how do you suggest balancing the use of models for decision making with the unpredictability of real life situations? Did you get that?
How do I balance models with real life decisions?
Yeah, real life decision. How do you balance the use of models for decision making with the unpredictability of real life situations?
Oh, I see what you're saying. The unpredictability. Well, when I was teaching at MIT before I retired, my field is probability, applied probability, and I was teaching undergraduate and graduate courses in probability. So uncertainty and unpredictability are part of the world I live in and part of the world I've analyzed. And I've actually, written a couple of books about this and many journal articles. And so I'm used to decision making in an environment of uncertainty. I don't know if that answered your question.
All right, David. Okay, so David says thank you. I believe his question has been answered. Dr. Richard, it's been an insightful time, and it's got me wondering what actually, led you to writing your book, Model Thinking for Everyday Life.
What got me to do it? What was the
To write
motivation?
Yeah.
Okay. At the time, my wife, Mary Elizabeth Murray, was still alive. She died about 2 years ago. She and I were soulmates, and she had lots of good suggestions for me. So when the COVID lockdown started, the COVID, we had like 2 years where we couldn't go outside or interact very much because of COVID. So I said, oh, well, my nickname is Dr. Q. Maybe I should write a book on queuing. And she said, Dick, this is up in my office on the third floor here in my house, our house. And she said, Dick, you've been there, done that. You no longer have a passion for queues. Think about this for several days and figure out what your passion is. And my passion basically was to reach out to the general public and explain model thinking to the general public. And so I spent 2 years, and that's the book. Model Thinking for Everyday Life, How to Make Smarter Decisions. And I'm very proud of this book. This is probably the best thing I've ever written, but it doesn't require any calculus, doesn't require any deep understanding of mathematics, and it's accessible. You can open up to any page and read that page and learn some things. So I thank my deceased wife for saying, Dick, don't write a book on cues. Been there, done that. You no longer have a passion. What do you have a passion for? And the passion was to reach out to people like yourselves who maybe would benefit from reading a book like this and seeing how model thinking applies to our everyday life.
Wow, that's so inspiring. Okay, so I have another question, but before that, I would like to mention that, yes, the recording to this session will be available. Yeah. Okay, so there's this issue with Nigerian public schools. So there is limited resources, there is, large classes, and how can discovery learning and model thinking be applied to improve the learning outcomes in such a learning environment?
You mean with large classes? The learning environment with large classes?
Yeah,
well,
and limited.
Why not make projects? So why not have the teacher say to the students, okay, you're going to start a 2-week project here, and what I want you to do is go out in the real world and see some operation that you would like to study, and observe it for a while. Maybe I can give you a letter indicating that you're a student in my class, and you could talk to a decision maker there in this service, and work off campus, and maybe create a model of that particular function that you're looking at. It could be a grocery store, it could be queuing in a grocery store, or inventory management, or how do libraries function, and how do they determine which books to buy, things like this. So to leave the campus and go off and interact in the real world is what I would suggest.
All right. So that's like getting practical experience, real world experience.
Yeah. But as an operations research person, I don't view that any conflict between academia and practice, because to me, in operations research, they're one. You can't do operations research, which is my field, and it's a very scholarly field. There's some people are, prove theorems and things, but I think you can't do operations research without researching operations. So theory and practice, in my view, are together like this. They're joined.
All right. Thank you for that. What of in the case of K-12 education? Yeah, K-12. K-12 education. I'm talking like primary education grade in grade school. So we call that primary school here in Nigeria.
Yeah, primary
So how
school.
do
Primary
Yeah.
school would be for grade for ages up to maybe 12 years old or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah. Same here. So what
Okay.
about that? What?
How do you apply this practical learning in such a case?
Well, I don't know. I've never taught a grade schools, although on several occasions I've been invited in to give talks to a grade school class, particularly here in my hometown of Lexington, Massachusetts. And I go in, and the students really respond to it, because so much of what the students are taught in a classroom is theory without application. And I tell them about how all the things in their lives that they experience on a day-to-day basis can be modeled with from this point of view. Hold on a second. Somebody's trying to get me on my cell phone, so I just turned it off. Yeah, so basically, I mean, model thinking is not scholarly. It's a way of life. It's a way of life. And as I think I said in my talk, I model each day by sending myself an email in the morning about how I think the day is going to progress. And then when any given thing happens, 3 of them are walks in the woods with my dog. I send an email back to myself, and I check that off as it's happened. So I actually model each day, and sometimes during the day things change. I have to adapt it, but it relieves any stress for me that I may forget something major to do on a given day. Like this talk today, priority number 1 when I made a model of today was, at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, you're going to be speaking to some wonderful Nigerians, and I'm so blessed and so honored to be invited to speak with you today.
Yeah, and we're so honored to have you. So you mentioned earlier that model thinkers, are influenced by facts only. So how can we balance rational thinking with empathy here?
With what?
With empathy.
With empathy?
Yeah. So like, how do we balance rationality? So like, model thinkers are swayed by facts, right? Not swayed by emotions. But there's still the place of empathy. And how do we balance that with rationality when making decisions?
Well, at least in my world, having empathy is not rational. It's not irrational. It's quite rational. When I interact with students over the years, I have great empathy for the students, and that's totally a rational adjective for me to apply to how I think about the students, and particularly the students I was worried about the most are not the A+ students who were very smart and got everything right? I was worried about the students who, with the bottom 10 or 20% of the class, I wanted to encourage them is to not give up and to not and not to drop out, and because they could still learn things and stay the course. So I had empathy for those students, and I had very few dropouts from my classes.
All right. So is there any, when I mentioned empathy, I was talking more about emotions. So the place of emotions, in decision making. So how do you ensure that while you're not letting your decision making to be influenced by your emotions, while you're only letting, facts and rationality influence your decision making, how do you make sure that there's still that emotional factor while like you're being rational? Yeah, I don't know how you can explain that.
Well, in my limited brain, emotion is part of my decision making process. So I don't view it as either or. I don't view emotion and data and decision making as in conflict. I view it all as one constellation that you take into account.
Wow. All right. Okay, thank you for that.
Okay,
I
thank
don't
you.
know if
Good
there are
questions.
more
Good
questions.
question.
Yeah, and also, Dr. Richard, you mentioned that you also wanted to learn. I don't know if you have any questions you have for us, maybe pertaining to Nigeria, since you would like to, be here someday.
Yeah, well, I'm honored that you wonderful Nigerians are spending time with me today, and you've invited me to engage with you in this conversation. So I'm honored about that. Nigeria has a great reputation as you know highly educated, people, good colleges, and hopefully someday maybe I can visit.
All right. All right. I think there are also a number of people from other countries here. I believe David is from, I think, is it Madagascar? I'm not exactly
Oh,
sure. Yeah. And I'm not sure where Lydia is from, but yeah, we have like people from, different countries here. So you talk about, Nigeria and all, and I'm just thinking about looking at our culture. Do you have anything to say about, culture influencing model thinking, or like what um role does culture have in model thinking?
that's a very interesting question, and that we can have a nice conversation of that over lunch or dinner. But we're all products of the culture in which we were born. So I'm a product. I'm a product of the American culture. You're a product of the Nigerian culture, and we have Madagascan culture, and these cultures are to be embraced and respected, and then you operate from that culture. Sometimes they help you with what you're trying to do, and sometimes the culture can be a little bit uh, delimiting, and so you have to maybe work against it a little bit to accomplish what you want. But but cultures are valuable, and I think we should all respect the cultures in which we live, and no culture is perfect, but we're all operators within that system. So we have the chance to change and change our cultures in a beneficial way.
Um, Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for that. I'm sure a lot of us here have gained a number of things. So can you mention or talk about any surprising insights you've gained from, like, studying model thinking, teaching model thinking? Because I know you've been teaching this for a very long time. So what surprising insights have you gained from studying and teaching model thinking?
Well, I think for instance, I gave you one with my example of the 911 system in New York, and
Yeah.
and when I worked there, and I lived in the system with two lieutenants for 2 months, and that was just when I was like 23 years old. That was early on in my career. I'm far older than 23 right now, but and I started my consulting firm. As I said, we had over 30 employees, and I love to find surprises, and I love to find problems, and I guess it's almost a religious devotion, model thinking, that I think that this approach can improve things. So if things are not, if the operations of something are not what you would like, you think they can be improved, to me, bringing model thinking to it in the broad sense, not a narrow mathematical, rigorous academic sense, but in a broad sense, can almost always improve things. And so that I go through life thinking that and believing that, and we're operating a consulting firm for 40 years that did that successfully. And people wouldn't hire us and pay us money if we didn't have a track record to show we were successful.
All right. So, we're in a very revolutionary age right now, the age of AI. And this has the power to influence a number of things, including how we solve problems. So how do you envision model thinking changing or evolving over time?
Changing apartheid?
No,
Is that
no,
what
no,
you're?
no. Changing or evolving over time. AI is changing a lot of things, changing
Oh,
ways we do things.
AI. You said AI.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes. AI.
yeah. So AI is very interesting. And it's transformative in both a positive and a negative way. The negative way is that with AI applications right now, you can ask AI a question, and it'll often answer in a deep and meaningful way, which is a perfect answer. And I worry that students doing homework now, some of them, we know this, some of them are no longer doing the homework themselves. They're having AI do it for them. And so that's a problem. Of course, the doomsdayers say, well, what happens when AI becomes self-aware? I don't think it's going to happen. But in the doomsday scenario, AI becomes self-aware as a living entity, and its own survival is priority number one, and then humanity is doomed. Now, I'm not of that school. I don't think that's going to happen. But AI is both positive and negative in terms of what's happening today in the world.
Do you want to shed some light on the negative and positive aspects?
Well, the positive aspects is that AI can provide, since computers can have access to data and information worldwide on all kinds of networks, you can ask questions of an intelligent AI system and get a pretty deep and data-informed answer back. And that's very impressive. 10 or 15 years ago, you couldn't do that. So it's those sorts of things that I find very interesting. The idea, though, that people will relinquish their own critical thinking, and especially students, to do their homework, and they'll have AI do it. That worries me. I know there are many cases of that listed, and so that's a problem. But those are just two examples. So it's both many things in life have both positive aspects and negative aspects, and we need to be intelligent users and consumers of them, and recognize and be aware of the negative things and try to avoid them.
Beautiful. So I think I would ask one last question before we
Okay.
call it a night, because your time has been fast spent. Talking about AI, there's this concern about how AI affects our critical thinking. That the constant use of AI, would make us very dependent on it, over independent, and not, be able to solve problems. Yeah. So, what are the ways that we can actually prevent this? And what are your thoughts around this issue, this concern? Is it valid?
Well, I mentioned this in my talk, and basically, there's a pencil right there. See that sharpened pencil? There's a sharpened pencil, and I said that when you're doing critical thinking, and when you're thinking about yourself or problems of the world or your life or even your day or how you want to manage your week or maybe a personal relationship you're having problems with, you want to think carefully about it. Turn the computer off. If the computer is off, the AI is not going to bother you. And get out those blank sheets of paper and a couple of sharpened pencils and sketch out your thoughts and work out your critical thinking thoughts on this. And it's amazing what you can come up with using this old-fashioned technique. Yeah, I sound like a retro guy before pre-computers, but I think retro thinking, the old-fashioned way of thinking this way, it really can be quite beneficial. So if you have a serious problem to think about, shut off the computer, shut off the AI, and think about it from with a blank piece of paper and some sharpened pencils. That's my recommendation.
So we basically have to make conscious efforts to detach ourselves from AI and actually solve problems.
It'll put a
Yeah.
big smile on you. Put a big smile on your face when you can solve problems the old-fashioned way. Pencil and paper with AI out of the picture because your computer is closed. I don't know how AI can get to you if you just have a pencil and paper and computer's off. And for readers of this book, by the way, I don't know if I said this. I say turn your computer off. I said there will be no computer version of this book. There'll be no. This is the only way you can get this book is by paper. And every 2 or 3 pages, I say, okay, let's stop and reflect over what we talked about the last 2 or 3 pages. And I wanted you to take your pencil and paper and answer the following kinds of questions. And they aren't questions like exam questions. They're reflection questions. How would you reflect on this? And how might you take that concept that we just talked about and apply it to your everyday life? And jot it down on a pencil and paper. And people who have done this with a book report great happiness. Great happiness.
Oh, amazing. So this is for everyone. That's Dr. Larson's book, which is available on Amazon. So it's an impactful book. And as he said, it's filled with, questions for you to reflect on that would actually help, in your model thinking, help you solve problems. So just go on Amazon and search for it, model thinking for everyday life. And
it's on Amazon, and I get 0 royalties from this. I wanted to make the charge as small as possible to make it as accessible to as many people as possible. So I get 0 royalties from it. So I didn't write this to make money. I wrote this to help people and to share my thinking about these sorts of problems.
So I'm sure you all heard that. So just go on Amazon and get the book, and it will be shipped to wherever you are. Okay. So I don't know if there are still any more questions, but we're going to call it a night. Dr. Richard, it's been an honor listening to you, learning from you. We're so grateful, thankful that you accepted, to join us at this event. Oh, someone is raising their hand.
Thank you so
If you
much.
have a question, can you drop it in the chat?
Or you could send me an email. I'm rclarson@mit.edu. I promise to respond to your emails. rclarson@mit.edu. And you all being here today and inviting me have touched my heart. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, so I think after this event, if you want to get in touch with Dr. Larson, we can share the email across to you. So you just have to reach out to us. So any questions you have, you just reach out to us. We send you his mail, and then you can connect with him. And as he said, he will definitely reply to you. So thank you so much, Dr. Richard. Thank you to everyone who joined us, who listened from the beginning to the end, regardless of where you are joining from, regardless of your schedules. I hope you learned a lot. I hope you're leaving this event with something very tangible. You're leaving this event with the knowledge that will enable you to solve problems better. All right, so.
Thank you very much. Good night,
All right,
everybody.
thank you, Dr. Richard.
Good night, everybody. I love
Good
you
night,
all.
everyone.
I love you all.
Love you too. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.